At a VIP networking event in Las Vegas, a billionaire investor smirked and said, "What happens here stays here." The champagne flowed, the music pounded, and a daring game of "no questions, no consequences" began. A handsome stranger took my hand and whispered, "For tonight, you belong to the moment." My breath caught as he pulled me closer, until a camera flash blinded me. A cold voice behind me said, "Actually, this night will follow you home." I turned, and my blood ran cold. I should have known better. I did know better. But knowing and doing are two different things. It started at a VIP networking event in Las Vegas. One of those over-the-top gatherings where everyone pretends to be there for business, but it's really just an excuse for rich people to drink expensive champagne and stroke their egos. My company sent me, and I went because I had to. I wasn't even in the mood to be there. I'd had a long week, my feet hurt in my heels, and I was nursing my second glass of champagne, half listening to some CEO talk about his latest venture, when I heard it. A billionaire investor, the kind of guy who makes headlines for buying failing companies just to tear them apart, raised his glass, smirked, and said, "What happens here stays here." People laughed, glasses clinked, and I went along with it, pretending I wasn't tired, pretending I was engaged. If I could go back in time, I would have walked away right then. But I didn't. Someone suggested a game. "No questions, no consequences," one of the startup guys said. "For one night, we do whatever we want. No explanations. No regrets." I remember laughing. I remember thinking it was stupid. But no one walked away. People wanted an excuse. That's when he took my hand. Tall, sharp suit, messy hair that was somehow perfect. Green eyes, deep and intense. The kind of man you notice even when you don't want to. "For tonight," he said, voice low, warm, dangerous. "You belong to the moment." I should have walked away. Instead, I let him pull me closer. The music pounded, the lights blurred, my head buzzed. I told myself it didn't mean anything. It was harmless. Just a little flirting. Then the flash. Bright. Sudden. I blinked, disoriented. A voice behind me. Cold. Familiar. "Actually," it said, "this night will follow you home." My stomach dropped. I turned. And my husband was standing there. Phone in hand. Camera still pointed at me. The first thing I noticed wasn't his face. It was his hands. They were steady. No shaking, no clenching, no hesitation. That scared me more than anything. Because if he wasn't angry, if he wasn't reacting, then he had already made up his mind. "Nathan," I started, but he was already turning away. I reached for his arm. He stepped back. "Don't," he said. One word. No emotion. Then he walked away. I followed. Out of the club, into the hotel lobby, past the rows of people pretending not to stare. "Nathan, please." He kept walking. By the time I caught up to him, we were outside. The night air was cold against my skin. He turned, finally looking at me. "What do you want me to say?" he asked. My throat closed. I had 100 things to say, 100 ways to explain, but none of them mattered. Not now. He waited. I had nothing. He exhaled, slow. "Go back inside." "No." He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. "I mean it," he said. "Go back inside. Do whatever the hell you were planning to do before I got here." His voice was still calm. That was worse than yelling. I reached for his hand. He didn't let me. "Was it worth it?" he asked. There was no right answer. "Nathan, I didn't." He gave me a small, humorless smile. "You did." Then he turned. And walked away. I barely slept that night. I sat in my hotel room, staring at my phone, waiting for a text that never came. By morning, he was gone. So was his suitcase. His ring. His presents. The only thing left was a message. "You made your choice." I flew home to Los Angeles, still convincing myself I could fix it. But when I got there, the locks had been changed. My clothes were in garbage bags by the door. I knocked. No answer. I called. No answer. I texted. "Me, Nathan, please. Just talk to me." Him, "No." Me, "I'm sorry. Please." Him, "You weren't sorry last night." I cried so hard I thought I would pass out. Then the real fallout started. Nathan wasn't just hurt. He was furious. And he wanted me to feel every inch of it. The next day, my boss called me into his office. "I got an interesting email," he said, sliding his phone across the desk. I didn't want to look. I already knew. It was a photo. Me. The stranger. The moment before the kiss. His hand on my waist. Below it? A message from Nathan. A polite, professional explanation of why I wasn't someone my company should trust. I lost my job that afternoon. That night, my parents found out. And the next morning? Nathan posted the pictures on Facebook. People talk about rock bottom like it's a moment. It's not. It's a slow, excruciating realization that you have ruined your own life. I spent the next week alone in my empty apartment, scrolling through hundreds of comments. She deserves it. Imagine throwing away a good man for a one-night stand. Hope she enjoys unemployment. But the worst one? Good luck finding someone who'll ever trust you again. I broke. Sobbing, curled up on the floor, shaking so hard I thought my bones would crack. Because they were right. I had ruined everything. And there was no way to fix it. It's been a year. Nathan never took me back. I lost my marriage. My job. My reputation. And for what? A moment. People always say, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But that's a lie. Because sometimes, what happens in Vegas follows you home. And destroys everything. I thought that was the worst of it. I thought I had hit rock bottom. I was wrong. Because rock bottom isn't just losing everything. It's realizing that things can still get worse. A week after Nathan's post, I stopped checking my phone. I couldn't handle it anymore. Every time I opened social media, there was another notification. Another comment. Another message from someone who used to be a friend, telling me exactly what they thought of me. I deleted my accounts. But deleting an account doesn't delete the damage. One night, I was halfway through a bottle of cheap wine when my phone lit up. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. But something told me to pick up. I pressed the phone to my ear. Hello? Silence. Then a voice. Low. Familiar. We should talk. I froze. It wasn't Nathan. It was him. The stranger from Vegas. For a second, I thought I was imagining it. Then he spoke again. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, he said. But this is important. I swallowed hard. My mouth was dry. How did you get my number? A pause. I have my ways. Something about that sent a chill up my spine. I should have hung up. But I didn't. What do you want? I asked. Another pause. Then, his voice dropped lower. Someone is looking for you. My stomach turned. Who? You need to be careful. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my heart pounding. For the first time since Vegas, something cut through the shame. Fear. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I stepped outside my apartment to find something taped to my door. A single Polaroid. Of me. From that night in Vegas. My breath caught. I snatched it off the door, looking around. My street was quiet. No one was watching. But someone had been there. I locked my door. Double-checked the windows. Sat on my couch, staring at the Polaroid. Who left this? Nathan wouldn't. He had already burned me in every way he could. This was something else. Something worse. I tried to go back to work, but no one wanted to hire me. I tried reaching out to old friends, but no one responded. I was erased. And now, on top of that, someone was watching me. I needed answers. So I did the one thing I told myself I wouldn't do. I called him back. He picked up on the first ring. I was hoping you'd call, he said. I gripped my phone. What the hell is going on? A pause. Then, meet me. I hesitated. I shouldn't. But I needed to know. Where? I asked. He gave me an address. Then he hung up. It was a coffee shop in a part of the city I never went to. I almost backed out. But when I got there, he was already waiting. Same green eyes. Same easy confidence. But now, there was something else. Something like concern. I sat down. He slid something across the table. A folder. I opened it. And felt the blood drain from my face. Inside were photos. Not just of me. Of Nathan. And he wasn't alone. In one, he was standing outside a hotel. In another, he was sitting at a bar. And in the last one, he was with a woman. A woman I recognized. My ex-best friend. I looked up at him, my hands shaking. What is this? His expression didn't change. Your husband wasn't as innocent as he pretended to be. I couldn't breathe. My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. No, I said. That's not, he wouldn't. But I wasn't so sure anymore. Because I knew that hotel. It was in Las Vegas. And the date on the photo? The night before he caught me. Everything tilted. Memories rushed back. Nathan had come to Vegas for work. Or so he said. He was supposed to be in meetings. But now, looking at these photos, I wasn't sure. Had he been watching me? Had he been waiting for me to screw up? Or had he already screwed up first? The stranger leaned back, watching me. I don't know what game he's playing, he said. But you weren't the first one to break your vows. I shook my head. No. That's not possible. But the proof was in front of me. The Polaroid. The unknown caller. The photos of Nathan. I had spent so much time drowning in guilt that I never asked the real question. Had I been set up? I sat there, staring at the photos, my stomach in knots. This didn't make sense. Nathan wasn't the type. He was stable, safe. I was the reckless one. I was the one who had ruined everything. Right. I looked up at the stranger. You're lying, I said. He didn't blink. No, I'm not. I shook my head. Nathan wouldn't do this. I stopped myself. Wouldn't he? He had already left me. Thrown me out of our home. Humiliated me. Exposed me. I thought it was because he was devastated. But what if it was something else? What if he had wanted revenge? Or worse, what if he had planned it? I needed answers. And I knew exactly where to get them. That night, I went to her apartment. Jessica. My ex-best friend. We hadn't spoken since the fallout. She had been one of the first to cut me off. Unfollowed me, ignored my messages. And now here she was, in a photo with my husband. I knocked. A long pause. Then the door cracked open. Jessica blinked at me, surprised. What are you doing here? I pushed the door open and stepped inside. She let out a breath. Wow. No, hi. No, how have you been? I held up the photos. How long? Her eyes flicked to the papers in my hand. What? I shoved them closer. With Nathan, I said. My voice was shaking. How long? Her face paled. She opened her mouth. Then closed it. And that told me everything. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't know what else to do. You knew, I whispered. You knew what he did. And you stood there and judged me? Jessica swallowed. I didn't know until after, she said quietly. I shook my head. That's a lie. She sighed, running a hand through her hair. Okay. Fine. I knew before. But I didn't think it mattered. I nearly dropped the photos. It didn't matter? Jessica crossed her arms. I mean, it's not like you were innocent either. I saw red. Oh, screw you. She rolled her eyes. You cheated too. I stepped closer. I made a mistake, I said, voice low. But you were my best friend. You smiled in my face while you were screwing my husband. Jessica flinched. That's not what happened. I laughed again. Then tell me what did happen. She hesitated. And that's when I knew there was more. Jessica exhaled. Then she looked me dead in the eyes and said, Nathan never forgave you for what happened 3 years ago. The room went silent. I felt cold all over. What are you talking about? I said slowly. She tilted her head. You really don't know? I stared at her. 3 years ago. 3 years ago, what had, and then it hit me. A trip. A work retreat in Miami. I had gone with coworkers. Nathan stayed home. And on the second night, I had too much to drink. Nothing happened. At least, I thought nothing happened. But I did wake up in someone else's hotel room. A coworker. Fully clothed. No evidence of anything. I had freaked out, rushed back to my room, and never spoke of it again. Nathan never found out. At least, that's what I thought. I stared at Jessica. My pulse thundered. Nathan knew? I whispered. She nodded. For 3 years? Another nod. I couldn't breathe. But, he never said anything. Jessica's expression was unreadable. Because he was waiting. The air between us was thick, suffocating. Jessica continued, voice low. He didn't want to talk about it. He wanted proof that you were exactly who he thought you were. My stomach turned. No. Nathan wouldn't do that. He wouldn't wait years just to get revenge. Would he? Jessica studied my face. You want the truth? She said. I said nothing. Vegas wasn't an accident. The words felt like a slap. My hands clenched. You're lying. Jessica gave a small, humorless laugh. Think about it, she said. Nathan didn't just catch you. He was waiting for you. I shook my head. No. Jessica leaned in. He wanted you to cheat. Silence. He needed you to cheat. The floor felt like it was tilting. My mind was screaming, trying to piece it together. Nathan came to Vegas for work. Or so he said. But what if he had been watching me the whole time? What if he planned for me to fall into the trap? What if I had been set up? I staggered back. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. Jessica stood. You were never supposed to find out, she said. But now that you have... She trailed off. Something about the way she looked at me sent a new kind of fear crawling up my spine. A deep, gut-wrenching kind. Like she knew something I didn't. Like she wasn't finished. I swallowed. What? Jessica glanced at the door. Lowered her voice. You should leave town. I stared at her. Why? She didn't blink. Because Nathan isn't done with you. I sat frozen, Jessica's words ringing in my ears. Nathan isn't done with you. The room felt too small, the walls pressing in. I wanted to scream, to call her a liar, to walk out and pretend this conversation never happened. But deep down, I knew she was telling the truth. Nathan had been waiting. He had been setting me up. And now, he wasn't just satisfied with leaving me, he wanted to destroy me. I left Jessica's apartment in a daze, my thoughts racing. I needed answers. And I needed them now. So I did something reckless. I drove straight to Nathan's office. The receptionist hesitated when she saw me. She knew who I was. Everyone did, thanks to him. I just need 5 minutes, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She pursed her lips. I really don't think. The door to his office opened. And there he was. Nathan. Looking at me like I was nothing. He didn't look surprised to see me. Because he had been waiting for this, too. Let her in, he said, voice calm. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me. And then it was just us. For the first time since Vegas. Nathan leaned against his desk, arms crossed. He didn't say anything. Just waited. Like he already knew why I was here. Like he was enjoying this. I swallowed hard. You set me up, I said. Nathan didn't even blink. You cheated, he replied. The words hit like a slap. My voice wavered. I made a mistake. But you planned this. Nathan tilted his head, studying me like I was an experiment he had already figured out. I gave you a chance, he said. 3 years ago. I could have confronted you then. But I didn't. My stomach twisted. I didn't do anything in Miami, I whispered. Nathan gave a short, humorless laugh. Maybe you didn't. He shrugged. Maybe you did. But the fact that you never told me? His voice dropped. That's what did it. My hands clenched. So instead of talking to me, you just waited? Nathan pushed off the desk, stepping closer. I wanted to be sure, he said. A slow, creeping realization settled over me. He had been waiting. Not for an apology. Not for closure. But for proof. And the moment I gave it to him? He burned my entire life down. I let out a shaky breath. You slept with Jessica. His jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. How long? I demanded. Nathan's expression didn't change. Does it matter? My vision blurred. Yes. I choked out. It does. Nathan exhaled through his nose. It started after Miami. I flinched. 3 years. 3 years of him lying beside me every night, pretending. My hands trembled. You let me think you were perfect this whole time. Nathan scoffed. I was perfect. To you? His eyes darkened. I was the husband who never cheated. Never made mistakes. Never lost control. He let out a bitter laugh. And then I watched you throw it away for a man you didn't even know. Tears burned my eyes. I thought we were happy. Nathan's face twisted. So did I. The weight of it crushed me. All this time, I had been drowning in guilt, thinking I was the one who ruined everything. But the truth was uglier. We had both betrayed each other. Nathan with secrets. Me with actions. And in the end, we had both lost. I wiped my face. I came here to fight. I admitted. To beg you to admit you set me up. To make you feel as broken as I do. Nathan's gaze flickered, just for a second. But now, I continued, voice hollow. I don't care anymore. Nathan was silent. Then, finally, he spoke. You want to know the worst part? I waited. He met my eyes. I wanted to forgive you, he whispered. I tried. A tear slipped down my cheek. But I couldn't, he said. And I knew you wouldn't forgive me either. That was the end. Not with screaming. Not with accusations. Just a painful, empty truth. We had already been over for a long time. Neither of us wanted to admit it. But now, there was nothing left. I turned to leave. Nathan didn't stop me. He didn't say a word. I stepped into the hallway, closing the door behind me. And for the first time in months, I felt something other than guilt. I felt free. A week later, I moved out of Los Angeles. Started over in a place where no one knew my name. Nathan never reached out again. I never tried to fix it. Some things aren't meant to be fixed. People always say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But I know the truth now. What happens in Vegas doesn't just stay there. It follows you. It destroys you. And sometimes, if you're lucky, it forces you to rebuild.